You're listening to Gone Mobile, your input and output for all things .NET MAUI and mobile.
Welcome back to another Gone Mobile. Alan, do you like my new purple office?
Well, I didn't think you were going to open with that, but yes, sure. For what I can see, I can still see your Mario. You pretty much tried to clone the back of your office.
I moved it over, but now I have like 120% more echo in here too. So hopefully the, while I seek out sound treatment for the room, things are not too echoey.
Yeah, you're a little bad today. A little bad. You were in a padded room before, right?
Well, yeah, it should be. Should be in a padded room. The other thing that I just noticed today, this is totally unrelated, but I was looking because I wanted to see if I don't know if my stuff's all backwards, right? Like mirrored now. Do my letters look mirrored?
No.
Okay, it's just me. Then it's one of those settings where I guess you see the mirror image. So I was searching on YouTube for Gone Mobile so that I could see if it looked like that properly on the past videos. Do you know what comes up if you put in Gone Mobile in YouTube? And I don't know. We have to fix this. I don't know how yet.
Do I want to know?
Well, it's not like, it's G-rated. It's a bunch of videos about like Ford Transit camper vans.
Let's see. I'm interested.
Yeah.
Well, no,
so
on mine. See, I'm using Google. Microsoft's forcing you to use that.
No, this is searching just inside YouTube itself.
Oh, inside YouTube. Okay, because if I look
I'm
on
the
Google,
site, and it's all just like some dude in his Ford Transit camper van and different years and reviews or something. Like it's.
Oh yeah, Gone Mobile vans. Oh man.
To be fair, he's got a lot more views than we do. So I mean,
maybe we're in the wrong business.
Yeah.
Bet you he can't take one of those to Maui though.
Probably not. But maybe he made an app for it. You don't know.
Maybe.
With .NET
so,
MAUI.
What are we talking about today?
Well, that wasn't a very good lead in for one, but it's because I think this is considered the show where I talk a lot. You're going to interrupt me and make sure that I stay on track.
Well, and I talked about my migration of my office. You migrated phones recently.
Yes, I did. I did migrate to a newer iPhone.
I'm kind of surprised that you didn't, because like we're not that far away from new phone announcing season, right?
But you see, I always get the deals on the previous year's phone, so it's about to be usually August. I get the new iPhone.
Yeah. Okay.
And I do that on purpose. I've been waiting for the flip phone, but I can't wait for it.
Coming.
I know, and it hurts my soul because I really want. It's going to come next year.
No,
just let me have this, John. Let me have this.
No,
you're wounding me to the very core.
It's going to be a long time yet.
Maybe we'll see,
or never.
We'll
maybe.
See. But if it was, I know it's not coming this year, so I didn't hold out hope. But I needed a new phone. I didn't break mine. John and I have been running the naked iPhones. This was a challenge that John made about 6 months ago.
For you, sure. I've always
you said no. I'm running caseless on this one, and if it breaks, I'll just buy a new toy. It was like your excuse to buy a new toy if you need it.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Oops, I dropped my phone.
I don't use cases. I haven't used cases for a long time.
Okay, well, fine. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. My flip phone's still coming, but that's
never
fine.
broken a front screen.
So no, I did once, and it was a brand new iPhone 6. Like brand new, same day. And I was doing construction in my basement and it fell about, I was actually laying down on my back trying to pull a wire through a wall. It's a long story. Anyhow, it fell from my pocket at the front. So about, I don't know, I want to say
6 inches.
Yeah, about that. And it hit just the corner and it completely shattered that screen. Like not even you could not see anything. It had shattered it so much.
Very unfortunate.
The only time I've never broken anything else. My iPhones have been great.
Dropped phones from way high up and done stupid things. And, on a Nexus 4 back in the day, I dropped it enough times and it broke the back glass. That was one of the first phones that had like a back glass. But then I just bought one of those like skins to put over it, and it was like, oh, problem solved.
Well, if you remember the iPhone 6, they kind of had like that beveled glass. They were into the pretty at that point. They weren't into the, hey, let's think this out because we can do, this phone won't be very durable, but it looks pretty.
Yeah.
And so that one was like I think they were starting to get into the no bevel.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had like those rounded glass corners, and that thing, it was destined for doom if it was going to happen. Now this one is titanium. I don't even know if you have to put a case on them.
Wow. I mean, I think the interesting thing is, I mean, I know some people that, where they work and stuff, like, yeah, okay, it makes sense to put something on your phone because you might, if you work in like construction or farming or whatever, maybe you're gonna drop it a bunch.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like most people don't give them enough credit anymore. Like they work pretty well without breaking. Now, I did break the back again on, was it the 13 Pro? What's that?
You just said you'd never broken a phone.
No, I said the front glass.
Oh, you did. You chose your words carefully. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So I broke the back glass. Just one hairline crack on, I think it was the 13 Pro, which
meh.
It was fine. But the thing that was annoying was I was gonna trade it in because I'm just like, I have literally behind me 2 drawers full of old phones, and like, yes, it's nice to keep not as old but still old phones every once in a while. I usually end up giving my older stuff now, that's like my own personal ones, to family.
Yep.
When they're looking for a new phone. But this one, I was like, okay, I'm going to trade it in because like I don't need to keep this one around. I had like one that was just a year older than that still. I'm like, fine. And I sent it into Apple, and it's like whatever I picked, right? It's like not major damages because I'm like, it's a hairline crack, like whatever. And then they, the appraisal value on, before you send it was like, I'm like, yep, that's fine. That'll do. And then I sent it there, and then they give me the update. They're like, oh, actually, we're only going to give you like a quarter of what we said we would for it because it has that crack. But the dumb thing is, I could have sent the stupid thing into AppleCare. Like I had coverage before, I still broke it. Like I should have just at that time said, this is going to be a problem for me in the future just because of the value of it. Let's send it in, pay the $30 and get it fixed or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I didn't do that.
Well,
so lesson learned.
Apple.
Yeah.
We all pay our price to Apple.
Yeah.
So I haven't broken anything since, but I tell you, last night trying to move the eSIM, it failed. And I mean, I only have a cellular phone. I don't do the house line anymore, thank goodness. Yeah. So it failed to transfer to the phone, to the new phone, but it did transfer off the old phone. So both phones were left in KO'd. So I had no phone. I couldn't get text.
Can't even call.
And the guy gave me an extra eSIM card, but you needed to receive a text to be able to say, I want to move to this eSIM. So I was like, oh my God. And then I had to contact Rogers on their online
website.
Virtual queue.
Mm-hmm.
It was a long night.
Did you? So I'm curious. In that case, if you needed to receive a text, did it have to be at a particular number? Like, could you have given them any number?
Original number?
Okay. So come on, guys. Like, I can't access the thing, so send me a text to the thing. Okay.
And then what's better is they don't stop you from moving, and the guy tells me, "Oh yeah, you can't move the number." Well, then why does it allow me to do it? Because the carrier can get involved.
Yeah. That's silly.
They need to mediate this stuff better. Doom, doom, doom.
Oh,
I got it.
That was something.
Yeah.
Some kind of segue.
It was worthy of your stuff. I saw the lead in and I went for it.
I've been actually contemplating, let's call it. I haven't committed yet. Maybe this is the time you can convince me to commit to doing it. To maybe, possibly, potentially, in some universe, kind of pulling it into my app.
Well, I failed on RX. I will admit defeat. You're just a stubborn old.
Yeah, get off my lawn.
I got words. You know what I'm. You can read my mind. I'm not going to say it because we're PG rated, but I'm thinking.
Stubborn old awesome person.
Yeah. So I failed on that one. I will admit defeat. But you have expressed interest in a Mediator.
Yeah.
Not so much on the server, even though you've been talking a
No,
little bit on the server.
my server stuff doesn't really, like, I don't do enough things that would even warrant putting it in there, let's say.
It's good for those modular monoliths, the ones that,
Yeah.
you start small and then you need to break them up later because you're getting a massive amount of traffic. Good place to start.
I'm not. It's like my server, and this is, I think, a fun little side note. It's an interesting thing to consider, like with modern development stuff. It's just like for the first, I don't know how long my app's been around, 5-6 years. I ran everything on one instance of like the lowest tier paid instance that you can buy that allows you to do like SSL certificates and everything on Azure. And that's been fine. It's like, I forget how much a month. Like
it's great cheap for growth. I mean, really, it's just stupid not to use Azure when you're starting out. And then when you get to that mid-level, after that, well,
yeah. So now I'm in the territory where it's like, okay, I had to go finally bump up a level, and now it's like 100 and something a month, and it's like
that's still nothing.
It's still nothing in terms of what cost and revenue and everything. Like fine, but it does, like there is the side of me like that never has gone away. That's like, well, I could stand up a server for like nothing that would run this fine, right? And it's like, yeah, no, you don't want to do that.
Well. But you could. You'd have to switch to Postgres and get rid of that object database of yours. And
it's so much work for so little gain.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking time is money.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, and this is, I want to do an episode sometime. That's not today, but I want to talk about like in-app purchases and stuff there, because there's another good time is money part of the story that is evolving for me.
So in case nobody figured it out, we are talking about mediation patterns.
We'll get there.
Kind of a general architecture, because this one has become near and dear to my heart. And I don't know, it's a couple months ago, I was looking at a potential customer. They had a whole whack of issues. Doesn't matter what they were, but mediator patterns are really good at kind of vertically slicing your business, not just your architecture, but your actual business or your domain, or right. So kind of drawing out lanes of, this is my work orders or jobs. This is my employees. Right.
Put it into some like context of like how you would vertically slice up something.
Yep. And the goal is that you might have separate databases, right? So if you think about the whole microservices kind of approach, you might have like, this is my employee database. This is their employee data. And then over here, there might be work orders that has an employee ID, probably, but not the employee information. So you might funnel those in together, ship them out. It does sound over-engineered in a way, but it becomes important later on. And it becomes easier to test. So for the server, it's pretty straightforward. Stay in your lane, right? From the server architecture, I feel like .NET's got that down to a science at this point, right? There's so many ways to do microservices and kind of keep that vertical slice vertical, as opposed to, well, going horizontal and touching everything, probably not what you want, right? So in vertical slicing, another kind of term that usually gets compiled with that is CQRS, or command query responsibility segregation. Vertical slice sounds a little bit easier to say.
Yeah.
So the main difference between, like, people go, what's a mediator? Well, it's basically just, instead of making signature calls with DI, you're basically sending a message through one little service, right? Just like a service bus, you put a message on it. Something may reply if it's a command. So one responder to a command or a request. You can also have events, which is like send an event in and it could fire to multiple people, but it's just an object. You don't know where it's going. You don't know who's handling it. Somebody's handling it. Otherwise it's going to error, but it's very loosely coupled.
So it's like a traffic cop, right? Like it's kind of sending stuff around.
Yeah. Like, I'm a person. I want to go that way. Okay, you may go.
Now, maybe it's a bad analogy in the sense that like traffic cop, I can talk, sounds a little bit more potential for like, congestion and stuff, right? Like what's the story look like in terms of the mediator? Because like conceptually, if things are sort of running through a central service, does that cause any problems with scaling in terms of like how those things are routed and distributed?
Not really, because it's very light from it to hop from the point of where you're calling it to where it's going. It's not really a hotspot. So,
Are you
which is a good
basically
question,
like,
because when we talk about something like message center in
Mhm.
Maui, if you're really abusing that thing, like I've seen people make Bluetooth calls over it,
oh yeah,
or accelerometer sensor stuff that's going over it,
ooh,
right? That's a lot. People don't realize that even though it's a small little chunk of data, when you're pinging that thing, it's got to be thread safe. So it's going to synchronize that call. It's going to start pumping it. And if you got a lot of listeners doing a lot of processing, it's all running in sequence. So, and you're sending that, like accelerometers, I think could send data like, I don't know, 30, 40 times a second.
Yeah,
Like really
Yeah.
rapid if you've got that thing
Yeah.
turned up.
especially you can in kind of different modes too, right? Like I'm doing a game, I need like low latency, tons of info, like let's go.
Yeah. So messaging, it's not
Yeah.
really, you need to be a little bit closer to the metal. I still wouldn't do it with a Mediator, but Mediator doesn't create that hotspot per se.
Mhm.
It's just really good at scattering that event if you need to.
Well, and like, without getting too deep into implementation details, but like Mediator would effectively be like a lookup table of like, okay, here's the thing, here's where it goes. It's not really like queuing messages so much as just
Not really,
directing
but
them.
you can, right?
Sure.
It's Mediator's there to kind of just, where do I need to route you, right?
Yeah.
It's a pretty straightforward thing. People are putting this on everything. The really popular one in .NET right now for kind of the server calls is MediatR. And we've mentioned that, I don't know, half a dozen times on the show because I loved it. But what it didn't focus on for me was apps. And that's fine. It's not, maybe it wasn't a good fit for it, but I saw something in apps that could potentially make Mediator a really good thing for .NET MAUI. So we'll get to that, but
okay,
we'll get to that. That's down my notes. Are you going to ask what?
Okay. Well, I know I was going to say like, okay, yeah. Why do I want it?
Why do you
Tell
want
me
it?
on it?
So one of the big things is that, I don't know, I've seen pool math, so you're not really getting into the service overload like a lot of people. And I think,
I have enough, but yeah.
well, some people have they'll have like 20 services be injected, right? Like big teams will have like 800 services, and you're like, dude, do you like your wrists? Like, do you want carpal tunnel?
Yeah.
Like injecting
Well,
all
and
that
this
stuff is
gets
brutal.
into where we talked about like, creating like a super kind of service of services kind of pattern too, right?
Yeah,
Which
you can
is
solve
what
it.
I do. It's not great, but it's fine.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's very common. It's what I usually tell people with
common services, actually.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. It's not a bad way to handle those, but you still end up with like those services that are not common. Like some people use repositories, burn in hell, but repositories they'll go crazy with. And so you'll see like all these repositories coming. You're like, man, how did we get here? Why are we doing this? And so you'll have like 20, you'll still have 20 services with that common service, right? So that's a lot of typing. That's a lot of stuff to go in. What if I could just put in one service, a Mediator service, and send messages through it? And it comes back with types and it's all loosely coupled, which is, DI people want that. And they want to be able to unit test easy. Well, the thing about Mediator is you have a message, you have a handler, right? So you might have an event handler, right? Events multiple, requests singular, right? And a request can have a response. So the idea there is that you might have a command that says, save my job, right? Or save employee. And what you'll do is you'll have a save employee object or contract, and you'll ship that through. But your request handler on that can inject I don't know if you've got a entity framework, DB context, maybe you got some sort of push notification service, email service. I don't know, you name it, right? But you can focus on what the business is going to accomplish and inject a smaller subset of services, because even when you've got that base common one, so you've got a base common service, you probably, let's say it's got 10 things in it, you probably realistically use 4 or 5 per page common. And then the rest
and that's the challenge, right? Because it's like at some point more slowly creeps into there because you're like, well, I'm using this in like maybe now a third of my pages, right? And so it starts to get like, what's the tipping point that you're like, okay, let's throw it in common services now.
Now, you could say that it's not really it's not an overhead in terms of performance
Right.
at all. It's
especially
a case
like in
of,
mobile, these are mostly singletons and stuff, right? It's
exactly.
like just references getting.
There's nothing there to slow you down. What it does do is go, well, I want to unit test this thing now.
Yeah.
Chances are you've got one just giant mock of your
Yep.
base services,
Right.
so you can unit test it. But as you add things there, you keep adding more of these big mocks.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's hit anymore, right? You don't know what your service is actually using. So that's not
Right.
really.
And as I've started, it's a interesting point because as I have started in my own app to like I'm not the best at testing. And this was always it was always funny because like an old school Gone Mobile, Greg Shackles was the test. I don't know what the right term is, but like you tested or you weren't friends with him.
Okay. Yeah, no, I get it. I'm kind of on that boat,
great.
Still
But
on that boat.
it's just like, oh yeah, all my tests. Yeah, I do that. Sure. And I've gotten better over time. And I've started, I added a new test project that's basically like trying to test my view model logic.
Yep.
Because, I have UI tests, which is great for some things. But, I can do more of the what I'm trying to accomplish in UI tests by just testing the view model, right?
Yep.
It's like stuff like, if the user enters, this value into this field, I want to make sure that, the results, from this property are such and such. And like, for me, there's a subtle difference between, testing the actual calculation itself, which I have, a whole suite of tests for that. And I've always had that because that's made sense.
Yep.
Between that and, when I do a thing or a combination of steps in my app, does it do the right thing? And mostly like I'm trying to backfill these as I fix bugs where I'm like, oh, there's this weird case if you enter something here and then you skip down here and put this, but then you go back up here and do that. The way that like property change notifications and stuff fire, some unexpected result happens here. And it's like, that's a really easy thing to test by just doing the view model logic. But so what's happening now is, like you said, I have a whole bunch of common services and mocks for them, but like, I don't always want to use the same mock for all the situations because maybe some tests I don't care about this other service that's here, right? But like, I actually want to do something differently when I'm testing this other scenario here. So I think to that point, like, yeah, this starts to get really kind of ugly as I go down this in terms of like this whole common thing as I'm adding new services in. So Mediator can help me with this, I guess, if I architect things a little bit differently.
Yeah, because you're just focusing on the thing, right? So this is the business I need this message to accomplish, right? So save an employee, right? I may do some validation. I may do, I don't know, some online check, like what if it fails? A whole bunch of things, right? So that's kind of something that you can do at a Mediator level. And then, you can test all of that code. You're actually testing the pure business of what that thing does, as opposed to trying to inject 5,000 services, figure out that you only need 3 of them, right? Like you can really kind of hone in on what it is that you're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. So that's a good start. It's a good start. So something else I wanted to look at here was Mediator at an app level. We have the message center. People tend to abuse it. Doesn't matter. It can leak memory. I know that the community toolkit's got that weak message center, whatever they call it.
Yeah, we're getting rid of the messaging service that's in. That was in Forms. That's in Maui. Like I think for Net 9, it might be marked as deprecated, but
just burn it to the ground. Let it go.
Yeah, I mean it's a process to do it. Obviously,
no, I get it.
That we don't want people using that. So,
but you know what? You guys were using it for a while because you needed it, right? You didn't have a way of getting things across the pipe. Now that you have DI, you do, and it's a little bit cleaner, right? So you don't have these messages scattering and where they're registered, where they're not. Are they leaking? Are they not? Have we unsubscribed? Have we not? Right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to do with kind of this app level was look at events. Like I want my view model, which is kind of short-lived. It may not be in DI, but it's definitely in a navigation stack. What if I wanted it to listen automatically and unsubscribe automatically to events? So that was one of the things I looked in with the Shiny moderator or Mediator is, what if I just say this view model, because it's short-lived, it wants to listen to, say, a logout event or, I don't know, you name it, some sort of event, connectivity event, if you want to have that, right? So it's going to listen to those and respond to those automatically. And when it pops off the stack, it's not going to listen to them. So, and that works with DI or without DI. It's fantastic. So your view model keeps working the same way it is, because there's a lot of people still that use .NET-MAUI that are like, I just want statics. I'm like, okay. So Mediator still needs DI, but it can still be dynamically referencing events. That was one of the different things that Mediator doesn't, like MediatR doesn't really do, because again, it's not looking at apps.
So how are you, I forget how you are accomplishing kind of wiring that all up from a Maui perspective.
So Maui has, obviously it has some globals that I can hook into, right? In terms of, what pages are up. And if you have a page, you can see the binding context, etc. Right? So,
so you're looking at the navigation stack.
Yeah. So I register a service that knows how to look at Maui, right? So there's a separate Maui package that has a whole bunch of stuff, which we're going to get to as well. And I can say, look at the navigation stack. Every time we fire an event, rip through the nav stack, go through the tab pages and all the tabs and all the navigation pages in there, and see if you can find anything that's wanting to know about this event and fire it.
So are you using like just are you reflecting at runtime to like look for if the type implements an interface? Are you using attributes or what? How are you doing that?
So in this case, it's an interface. So you'd say I-event, Shiny Mediator.
So you're like if the page's binding context is I-event whatever kind of stuff. Okay, cool.
Run it, and it's not reflection, right? It's just a low yield.
No.
Skim through, and people go, well, it's going through the nav stack. That's slow. Not really.
How deep?
How
is
many
your
pages are you going to have?
If you're like thousands of pages deep, you've got other problems.
Yeah, so I'm not worried there. And it's nice and fast. It just goes through, and this way you don't have to, unsubscribe, subscribe, etc. It's just dealt with.
Right? So you're basically when a page is pushed, you find a new thing that you're not tracking already. You kind of add it to your lookup table, and
that's what's cool.
Get rid of it.
I don't even bother to do that. Don't need to.
You're just like when the request comes in, go look at the stack and just okay, cool. So you're not even you're not holding references. So like you're not impacting. You're not messing things up just by the fact that you're kind of observing them. I guess.
It's you either have the event or you don't, and if you don't, whoopee, I'll iterate you again next time.
Yep.
Again, maybe you have 10. Maybe 20 items. If you got big tabs, who knows? I
feel like, and maybe you haven't done this yet, but it wouldn't be that bad to set up like a stress test kind of scenario to see like how, I'm with you in the camp of it's not a problem, but it might be interesting to see like, okay, how many different like, event interfaces are can I register? How many things can I throw on the stack? Can I get to a point where I've done enough that it's like, oh yeah, this lookup now, because I've got like 1,000 different pages and 200 different events. Now it takes like 50 milliseconds to walk the whole stack and, do something.
Yeah. You know what? Until I see a cause, because I'm using it now in my production stuff. And until I don't want to start optimizing for a problem that doesn't exist yet.
I'm not suggesting the breaking the rule of optimization. It's more like it'd be interesting to know. I always think it's interesting to like see, where's the limit kind of, where would you actually start having to care about this? Well,
I can honestly say, don't do an event for say something like an accelerometer. Just
sure.
It's going to pump events. Like it's just too fast, even for messaging center, right? It'll pump them too fast. So you're right. It's interesting to know, but just be smart about it, I guess. In any case, right? Because even even some events, if you've got a really busy service, if you've got a lot of listeners on it and it's all local in memory, you got to be careful, right? Because you got like 20 listeners and that event's coming in, 1,000 times a second, right? Vis-a-vis Azure Event Grid,
Yeah.
right? That's a lot of processing.
Now, do you like thinking this through? Like one of the things, if I was going to swap this into my app, I know a couple places where I would maybe want to do it. One of the things I've kind of run into before is, I think, depending how you push stuff onto the nav stack, like I use, a modal pop-up kind of page, which is just like a normal modal page, but I like
Yep.
make the background transparent and stuff. And so like I've run into scenarios where I push that page maybe is not watching actually for anything, but the one below it in the stack, is subscribed to an event for something changing.
Yep.
But because it's still kind of visible, it's kind of the question of like, do I want it to still listen to those events? So I'm curious for how you kind of reason about, like, you're walking the stack and you're just doing it on everything in the stack,
Yep.
or you're saying like, no, only the thing that's visible really should care about the update.
For now, I'm going the whole stack because you may want to notify the lower pages to be ready. So something's happened up top, because normally it's triggered by something up top, right?
Right.
So maybe the
So
bottoms
you
are
might
aware.
want to, maybe, I guess, taking that into like, your own hands, using your pattern. Maybe I would do something like, don't just blindly update the UI when this event comes in, but like maybe, set a flag that, when I know I'm back at the top of the stack, I
then
might
do a
wanna
render or
something.
a change
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
normally what we're doing. I have looked at doing an attribute that says only fire if it's actually the top level.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a little bit over engineering right now to do. So until I have a reason to do it, it's probably something that doesn't need to bear the cost. Now, that's an interesting question anyways, because frequently when an event fires, it doesn't necessarily mean you're on the main thread. So what people tend, how many people do you see broadcasting to the main thread properly? Because that's a place where you really want to try catch.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, kaboom, there goes your app. And because you've called the main thread, like the essentials main thread, it kind of swallows the stack a little bit on you. You don't really know. Some logic crashed because you didn't try catch inside of that. I've seen people try catch outside of it, but that's hopping threads on you, man. That try catch is going to miss.
Yeah.
So I've seen people miss on those try catches, and then the whole darn app comes, bringing down. So, and I often notice, not only are people doing the main thread wrong, they're doing their try catches wrong, right? Like on events. So I generally tell people, when do you put a try catch? Where the thing started, where the action started, or where the event is firing, right? Because maybe I tapped on a button or an event is firing, try catch. So the good thing about Mediator is that you can get into these kind of wrappers or middleware that kind of surrounds all that stuff. So let's say, a request handler, when I request data, if it doesn't work, I want it to throw an exception, come back out to me because I can deal with that. With events, often events are kind of like a fire and forget. In the server world, they're definitely fire and forget, but in this app world, a crash is a crash, right? So you gotta protect your events. So you can do that with middleware that comes built into the Shiny Mediator right away. Is it'll say, look, this event ran for too long, so we've got some timed logging. So this took like 3 seconds, log an error. This crashed, log an error, but it didn't crash the whole app. That event just didn't run. You can pay attention to those. You can not pay attention to those. Either way, it's going to save your app. So you see that you log the misbehavior. What you do with it doesn't matter, but at least it didn't take out your whole app for an event.
So let's, I realize that, we've talked about this a bunch, not on this episode or on, other episodes too. I think it might be worth like just taking a slight step back and going over the different like parts of what your implementation looks like. So like the pattern, I feel like you've probably well described enough, right? You've got requests, and you've got
Events.
basically like events.
And then you've got
Um,
requests with responses.
Okay, yeah. So like,
There's kind of another one which I'll talk about in a sec.
what? Yeah, let's talk about what that I guess kind of looks like in a practical sense in an app.
So, in an app, it depends. Like your contracts can do anything. So let's say I might want to make an HTTP call, right?
Yep.
At some point, I want to make an HTTP call. Why would I put it in a Mediator? Well, one thing is that I don't know. Maybe another team owns that service. Maybe they're changing the contract. Who knows, right? Doesn't matter. Somebody else is implementing it that knows how to do HTTP properly. So I want to say get people as an example.
Mm-hmm.
So I call mediator.request new get people. I might pass in some arguments with my contract. Don't know, right? Like get people age 40 and older. Who knows? So I would pass that contract, and the contract would say your response looks like this. You're going to get an IEnumerable of some people object, or there's also a streamed request. So I might like an async enumerable. Maybe I want to stream. Maybe it's a large result set. Who knows? But you can get streams out of it as well if you want. But what that looks like is basically give me an HTTP result of these people. Now people are going to go, well, why do I need that? I can do that with DI right now, right? That's the first thing you're thinking out of your head.
Sure.
But you have to try catch it. And basically, if you're try catching it at the point of a command, right? That's a normal spot to do it. Or when your view model's becoming visible. You have to try catch, and the same thing we do in try catch every time is log it, tell the user, sorry, we screwed up. Or you might have some resiliency, right? You want to build some poly into it so it redoes the request because it failed right away or timed out or who knows, whatever happened. So you have to add that into the mix, right? Sure, your service can do that as well.
Yeah.
But let's say I want to break in a couple other things. Maybe I want caching on it, right? Maybe I want offline. So now we're getting into all this. It's
right, and then
blowing up on you.
You're starting to have to kind of think about that implementation for every service that you're implementing separately, right? Unless you create then some kind of generic, service implementation, right? Like
it gets just that alone. You start thinking like, holy crap, that's a lot of stuff, right? And so you start building it into your lower tiers only to realize, oh, now it's on everything, and I only want it on a subset of these.
Right. Yeah. So like I want to retry with poly, but only for this,
one particular asinine call that just for whatever reason the server is stupid with it. Who knows? Right?
And even like maybe even that same call, sometimes that code path you want to retry, and other times you don't.
Yes.
Right.
You don't know.
So then you're coding like some weird wrapper around this thing so that sometimes I can pass a flag in to run it through this retry delegate, and sometimes not.
Right. So either you end up injecting like, what do we say? We've got cache, we got resiliency, we got HTTP calls. So we just injected 3 services, and then we've got something that sends a dialogue to the user to say, yeah, we screwed up, or you're stupid, or something, right? And then we've got a logging. So there's 5 services just right out of the bat. 5 flipping services, right? What if it's too slow? We want to log that too, right? So it compounds really quickly. And if you build it into your base layers, it ends up on everything, or you end up building this logic around it, which ends up, an abstract of an abstract is now really bad. And it's like a poison. It just bleeds through. So this was the key thing with Mediator in .NET MAUI was, what if I could just mark the damn thing like a request handler? So we've already said a request has one handler, right? It's a command. What if I could just put an attribute that says executed? I want this state for offline. So if there's no connectivity, it's another thing we didn't even talk about. So return the last result you had. So the last result that came back, I serialized it to JSON, saved it on the disk. Connectivity is saying it's offline, so I'm just going to return from disk. I'm not even going to call the request handler. Or I can say, you're online. I'm going to get that result from the server, and then I'm going to store it offline. So the next time you're offline,
right. And you don't have to reason about doing that yourself in your service.
And you put a single line attribute on your request handler. that one call.
Now, can you do that dynamically with your pattern yet? Like, can I say I'm going to send this one request, but I don't want to cache it right now, and I might call the same, send the same request in the future and say, this time I do.
Not really, because that would be more on your, if you need to get into custom logic at that point, then that's more you want to do in the handler.
Okay.
But I think the thing that's important here is that we initially we did offline mode for it in an attribute on a request, on a specific request handler, right?
And you could always, I guess, well, you wouldn't have multiple handlers for that same request, though. Yeah,
Nope.
I was just trying to think, can like kind of duplicate things, or like make another handler that uses the same implementation.
You
but
wouldn't
one
do that,
caches,
right?
one doesn't.
But what you could do is, if you have multiple parameters, right, and those parameters change, like date times or ints or whatever, you could make the request have a key that Mediator knows to look at, and just like a cache key, and it goes, oh, okay, no problem. I'm going to watch it for this key. If this key comes in, that's what I'm going to use as the offline return. So it's smart.
That makes sense.
One line of code, one attribute on your request handler.
Yep.
And on the thing that we said problematic. The same goes for caching. The same goes for resiliency. It's just, we're just tacking on attributes. The try catch we were talking about, that's already built in, right? You don't even need to do, you just, it's there, right? So if I have another attribute called user notify, you can give it a string for the pop-up, the page dialog, the ugly dialogues.
Yeah.
Sorry, user, we suck. And that's it. If it sees a problem, it'll throw the exception, but it'll try catch for on your behalf, log it, send the page dialog to apologize to the user. All I had to do was attributes. To me, this was great.
Because
I
you
keep seeing people do
source
try
generating from those attributes or something, or
no,
is it
because I don't
looking them
need
up
to.
at runtime
Middleware is kind of a difficult thing to wrap in, because you don't know the scope of it. You don't, does it stay in memory? Is it a singleton? Is it a scoped? Who knows, right? It gets difficult there. And there's not really a performance headache there. Now, I do have source generation for registering all these darn things, because you can get a lot of handlers, right?
Yeah.
Before we had a service that might have or a controller, right? That's another good one that had 5 or 6 methods in it that we would call handlers. You can implement multiple handlers on a single class if you want, for all the different messages. That's not a problem, but you still have to register it with all those things. So there's some source generation to help there to alleviate the calls. We'll link docs and stuff at the end of it, but
yeah.
I still think that that's the pretty cool play here, is because the focus on the app, like we're talking about offline caching, resiliency, validation, if you need to validate an object, right? Data annotations or fluent validation. You get that with nothing more than an attribute and doing what you were going to do anyways. So to me, it's a huge win with the middleware alone. I wouldn't compete with Mediator at all if I couldn't do that from an app level. And I think that's the one thing that I've offered that's a little bit different.
Now, one other one you've got here is a replay. I'm kind of curious to think of where you're thinking of using that and how.
So replay is an async enumerable, and what it does is sometimes when you come to a page, you just look, that call is going to take a second. Just give me the last results, and then we'll tell the user, yeah, we're waiting for the next one. So there is a case where a lot of companies I work with, they're just like, why can't you just show the next one? Okay, well, that's kind of offline, but not really. They're just like, give the last results that were there as we call the server.
Right. And
then when the server result comes back, replace what's there. So this was an actual specific need for a couple people that I have, where it's just like, okay, that's easy to do with an attribute.
Yeah.
On an async enumerable call or request, just put an attribute on, same thing. Request keys there. It sees the same request key. Here's the last result I have. Call the server. When it comes back, pipe it again, because you've got an async enumerable now, right? So I can actually return multiple calls or results from that, and you can bind it however you want in your view model.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I think it's pretty awesome. Pretty
Pretty great.
What else we got?
So what else are we missing about? I'm curious if there's any other mobile specific parts that we haven't talked about.
No, we talked about the navigation stack, which that one's again unique. Kind of all the middleware that's specific to mobile and .NET MAUI. There's Blazor aspects of all the stuff we've just talked about too. So if you're doing Blazor hybrid or you're doing, Blazor WebAssembly, a lot of these things work. Not all of them yet. There's no such thing as connectivity yet on Blazor, but there will be in the near future. And then we can have a service that listens to that and does all the same things, but in WebAssembly, which is pretty awesome as well.
And how are you finding, like, I don't think this is going to make things worse than how, some things are set up today. But like, I'm curious, like one of the challenges when we start talking about, wrapping things like with poly or just the deeper that you kind of shove an operation into things that are wrapped around it.
Yep.
For things like error reporting and stuff, like I know I've had my own challenges with like, it's hard to really get a good stack and really tell kind of where, the actual source of this thing happened. Like how does that kind of end up playing out when you use something like this, especially when you start kind of throwing in the caching and resiliency and that kind of stuff?
So I think the one thing about Mediator is that like when you do this in services, you end up with like a layer or like a stepping stone. And in a lot of cases, when we talk about middleware, like people use middleware in ASP.NET Core all the time, right? The concept is exactly the same, except ASP.NET Core has the option of returning different results, whereas in the Mediator world, it's like, this is the request, this is the result, like it's known. So the middleware is kind of like a stepping stones. So it'll go in sequential order. It'll go step, 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 step. Okay, call request if you need to, right? You might have one of those middleware say, no, they're offline, forget stepping, don't call the middleware, right? Before we used to have like a before and after, right? I don't know if you remember the early days of kind of this middleware-ish type setup was you'd have, this is before the call, this is after the call, and you'd have those interfaces, but you never had a way to say, don't make the call at all. So that it was like sandwich meat, but it wasn't, you couldn't take the meat out. Couldn't replace the meat. So with middleware, you can. It's like, here's a step. You decide when to call the next guy in line.
Or
And if you even want to, right? Like I said, if you're offline, don't go any further. Stop right here. And it sounds kind of like a bad thing. And then, by the way, you step out, right? So you step in, and then you step all the way back out in the same order. It's like a stack, a pop, and a push and a pop.
It's like nesting dolls.
Yeah. The difference is that when you do that in services, you're usually passing through signatures in your code. That's what makes it hard to get. Once you've done it, it's hard to get out. But if you have a Mediator where we've stacked on attributes, the order will still execute like that. But what you can do is you can just say, I don't want to cache this anymore, or I don't want this to be offline anymore. And you comment out that attribute and it's done. It's gone.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a difference between all these signature calls that you're manually having to make, as opposed to just stacking the things you need on a specific call, right? And I think that's the pretty big sell on mediation is that it just can look at what's going to happen or what your handler wants to do, and either react or not react. Oh, you don't have that attribute? Go away. Leave me alone. I'll just execute you. Yeah. Right. So that's kind of how it looks at it. It looks at the attributes. So it's a stacking effect versus a kind of push through and you can't get out of it now. You've tangled the spaghetti, you can't get out of it. Whereas you've got a stack of pancakes, I can just remove one of the pancakes and keep going, is how you can look at Mediator calls.
And then the other thing that, this more on the just development side of stuff, like, and I don't think there's an easy answer to this, but there's also like, again, this isn't a new problem, but it kind of got me thinking, how could this be solved better? Which is like, as you're coding these things, having something intentionally loosely coupled kind of means that it's also loosely coupled in where the code lives and finding, how the pieces kind of link together.
This was kind of one of the good questions you had right out of the gate when you started looking at this, because you're right. When you start using a message, you're like, where does it go?
Yeah.
And the system doesn't really know that until runtime, right? So it's built up the dependency injection. Everything's been registered. You're right. That is a hard thing to find, right? Because one step is you can comment out the contract. Just like you would, like if we were in Message Center, we have the same problem, right? Who's listening?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Who's publishing it, right? So
Yep.
you end up commenting out the contract to go and find it. So that is a problem with message-based systems. You and I kind of had the conversation about looking at stuff like, now I'm losing the context of it. Not source generators, but analyzers.
Like analyzers, yeah.
They could go and look for it, during your dev time to say, oh yeah, we see it over here. Or, hey, we noticed you've got this contract set up, but there's nothing. We don't see anything down the line in any of your projects that's actually going to handle that.
Yeah.
So,
and you can't, I'd mentioned too without thinking, right? Like, oh, well, what if you put like an attribute on it? And it's like, yeah, well, no, now you've coupled things together.
You put the message right back together with the handler, which, in retrospect, it's not really a huge issue, but now it requires you changing the contract and having some stuff coupled. It's
not, it made
semi
things a little
defeats
bit
the
muddy.
pattern, not fully.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But I think as we look forward to that, there's ways there I could say, okay, a request, you have to have a handler for. The system goes, no, that's an error condition, right? You called request or send, and you sent a request through the mediator, and it now doesn't have a handler. That's an error. Events are different, right? You can have 0 or you can have many.
Right.
So that'll just go, okay, they're great. There's no events. Who cares?
Yeah, I think, for me, the thing that hits, and I run into this with how I've separated my, projects and stuff in my own code too, is like it really kind of was an aha, like I wish there was a better way to either have the tooling infer this kind of stuff. Like it's just code navigation at some point. It boils down to, it's like, okay, I have, this request, this interface, right?
Yep.
And so like I'm gonna send a request. Well, okay, where does that live? Okay, it's over here. Okay, well, who implements that? Okay, these things implement that, and they live over here. Okay, now I want to look at what the response looks like, and it's not.
Well, the response is part
do.
of the request anyways, so you know what type is always coming back. You just don't know who's
Yeah,
handling it.
but is it usually, if I'm saying that, is it usually an interface that I'm, that I'm getting back, right? So like, do I?
No,
Not necessarily. I guess
necessarily.
it's just a little tedious. And again, I'm not saying this is your library specific problem by any means. It more just highlighted like, oh,
it's a messaging based architecture problem.
Yeah, it's like it would be neat to have a way. And then I started kind of looking like, I wonder if like there's any Roslyn stuff that you can hint at, and that it doesn't affect compile time or anything like that. And yeah, no answer yet, but it is a problem that would be kind of interesting to think more about and see if there's a way to improve the developer experience around.
I did looking at the contracts. The problem is where you look at them, right? Because an analyzer basically focuses on the library it's installed, right?
Yep.
So you'd only want the analyzer in the absolute global root, and then it would say, oh, that's a contract. Give me all the contracts that are coming in from all the sub projects.
Right.
Start looking at them, and then find the handlers. So first of all, it's going to be slow. Because you got to look at everything in its mother coming in, and you have to be at the root. Otherwise, it's going to look at the contracts and go, I don't know. I don't see anything linked to this. And I don't think you can look outwards. You can only look like what's coming in. You can't look where it's going out to. So it's been difficult. It's not a problem I know how to solve right now, but you're right. It is a problem. So you have to resort to that old school way of commenting out the thing, finding all of its reference points in your projects, and then honing in on that.
Yeah. And maybe somebody listening has an idea that we're not thinking of.
Well, the way I generally handle it is in your vertical slice. So if we've talked about employees, you have a namespace that you have a namespacing pattern. And I mean, people don't have to follow it. It doesn't care. But if you follow kind of a naming standard, right? Like a lot of people like to do view models, and they have a view models folder, and then they have a views folder. I personally hate that. I'd rather it was by the feature, and then the page is right there, and then the view models right beside it. But in the cases where you have view models, and then you have the pages in a separate folder or views in a separate folder, that naming convention and that naming standard. So you just go, oh, this view model is named this, then there must be a corresponding views / whatever page on the other side.
Yeah.
So you can do that. It works. Pick your battles. Understand how you want to do it.
No, for sure. For sure. I mean, it's,
The one other
there's
thing
pros and cons to doing it any which way, generally.
the one other thing I wanted to come back to is that we talked about, well, what happens with the events. So events also have the middleware that we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a case where events, when they fire, they're not on the main thread. There's also an attribute for that. So you can set main thread and it'll do it properly. It'll do the try catch so that your app doesn't go.
Yeah. Does it just call like the Essentials API
Yep.
or like, okay. Because like one thing you had mentioned was, wrapping up your stack basically. So like part of me wonders too if it's better to go directly more if you could, and what that would make the stack look like, so that you're not like digging into like, oh yeah, Essentials main thread, which actually digs into this platform specific thing, like
I could, because you can register. Technically, it's when you're registering your handlers or even your middleware.
Yeah.
If you compile it as an Android side or an iOS side or whatever platform you want on your own, and it registers, it's all the same stuff, right? It just, your left side on Android does, what's their stupid thing? What do they call their main thread?
Oh, the
looper.
runnables.
Looper.
Main
looper. And then on the iOS side, it's the dispatch. No.
It's like, I think you grab a view, any kind of view, and you invoke on main thread from it or something.
No, they have something new, I thought. Newer. Yeah. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. See, memories are gone. We're too old for this. We're too old for this. And I guess the last plug is one of the things, if you're using Mediator, if you're using API endpoints, a lot of people end up with like these controllers or all their middleware, like the minimal API registrations, to inject Mediator and then call it and all that binding. That drove me nuts. So for MediatR, I had code that would go looking at all of the handlers that were registered with MediatR and then register the minimal APIs for me, because that was just like boilerplate and it was a lot of duplication. I hated that. So I brought that forward because I wanted it in my package. The MediatR stuff was my own thing. I kept it to myself. I was greedy, John. And now it's of course in my package, so I could plug it, be like, hey, save some boilerplate.
So you're going to throw a bunch of links on the show notes for this one?
I will. This is good architecture. I hope people look at it. I hope you
the area that I'm contemplating putting it in to start. I mean, there's two actually. The one is maybe less of a savings. Like I use events in some places kind of to do the same, right? And I subscribe and unsubscribe properly like a good person. But the one that gets kind of squirrely is with subscriptions, like in-app purchase stuff, where I want to, I call it from a bunch of places. So I request it from a bunch of places and I wire up the event handler in a bunch of places because I want to know when that status changes, which it can happen at a bunch of different times, where generally most of my app, I'm like, I know when the places that something like, your pool that you're viewing is going to change are fairly well known and minimal. And subscription stuff is like, Apple can call back into your app at any point in time, basically, and say, here's a change, right? Android is kind of the same too. And I also, like on Android, I'm like, oh, if you're near your expiry date and I'm going to go, like Android, you don't have to prompt the user necessarily to check some of the information. So I use that to my advantage. I'm like, if it's near the date, like go out and check, but that's an asynchronous thing. And so it can come back at any time. There's just a bunch of like in and outs for where this stuff can happen. I'm like, this probably would be a good place to make use of it.
And that's because you've got a lot of, I guess you could be navigating through the pages and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm on this page. I need a modal to pop up and warn the user. So there's obviously other ways to handle it too, but it's, if you just pipe that event out, you publish the event, who's ever on top that needs to listen because you need some sort of UI interaction. It's not a bad way to do it.
Yeah.
I was
hoping that's where I'm looking to introduce it. Looking to introduce it because
I think that, dude, I'm doing this all because of the middleware. That's where I was like, why? Yeah, I could have built this into Mediator, I believe. But I just had so many ideas when I started creating this. I was like, this is going to work for me.
Well, and the middleware is nice for this too in some ways. And tell me if I'm maybe using it wrong to do it like this. But like one of the things that I think of immediately is, oh, let's make some middleware that checks to see like if the request does the middleware, yeah, it runs on the response, right? Like
Yep.
I could hook it up so that when there's an event that is fired because the subscription status changed, that status might be containing like the receipt information from the purchase.
Yep.
If it was a purchase, well, maybe I want to send that out to my server too, and I don't really want to, like, where else do I register that, right? Like I don't want to do that as maybe that's not a good middleware use. I don't know.
No,
I'm
that's
just trying
probably
to
not a
think.
middleware use, but you're going to listen to some event that's
Yeah.
not Mediator based, right? But what you could do at that point is say, like, you got that data in, you don't want it to fail. That's the other thing, right? If if your
Right.
server fails, like you got the notification somehow,
Yeah,
you need to
I wanna
store
keep
it so
trying.
that next time, right? That could be a middleware thing. Your handler could just say, look, under no circumstances, if this guy fails, can this call be lost? It needs to call later. So if we fail, no big deal. We're going to wrap it up. But the point is that it knows don't die, don't lose this
Don't
stuff,
die. Yeah.
because otherwise that's it. The server doesn't know.
And like connectivity stuff and all the fun things, right? Like throw that all in and
Right.
just like make sure it works.
And then once you know that that's propagated to the server, you might mediate your event right after that, almost like transactional based to say, yep, server's now aware, you're good. Notify
Yep.
the UI and tell the user they're good. Do your stuff. Probably not middleware. Probably not, but it could be.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Yeah, I'm sure I'll bug you with more questions as I get closer to doing that. That's one of my next big tasks for the app is figuring out my subscription stuff because, oh man, Apple and Google, they keep changing things and they're already terrible.
Well, you can do offline now without bringing in shiny jobs.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, just caches some calls. It goes to
well,
disk.
that's
want.
the first thing I'm going to look at when I go to install this thing, right? Is like, what are you bringing in with you?
I'm not bringing RX. That was,
and if you fail that test,
the immediate thing you said
gone.
to me, you can look the actual references. I don't think I actually bring in any references, to be honest, other than DI. You already have that there.
Yeah, I already
DI
have
and logging.
I'll be checking. I'll let you know if I find otherwise.
I went light. I didn't put an RX, John, because I know you're you're an impossible sale to it.
That's right. I wouldn't use it then, and I'm very close to maybe actually using this now. So
all right, do it.
All right.
So if anybody else has cool libraries out there, I mean, I don't mind plugging my stuff. I really think this is a cool one. I hope people use it. But if you've got a cool product out there or cool open source library, tell us. We'll talk about it.
About the ones that you have, the ones that we don't know. Like there's a few that are neat that we've maybe mentioned even already, and ones that I know of. But every once in a while, I'll see like, oh, that's cool. Somebody will show off something. I'm like, I didn't know that existed. So we want to know. Everyone wants to know.
I mean, I'd like to see stuff that's innovative. Like there's a couple UI libraries out there that I think are pretty jiggy. But if you've got something like this I think was pretty innovative. I don't think this exists anywhere else in our ecosystem. That's why I kind of wanted to selfless plug on it. But if you've got other stuff, I love architecture. Bring it. Let's see it.
Yeah. And you can go figure out how to send that to us at gonemobile.io, the website. I don't know if we link. I'm sure there's a link to there's a link to all the different podcast directories. So certainly pick the one that you like, or just go find it on your app. And we're still gonna keep asking for those 5-star reviews. So please consider.
Yeah. See, John didn't have a bad joke this week, but
no,
he won't have bad jokes if you let us know.
Or if you like the bad jokes,
more bad jokes.
Vote with your stars or ratings or thumbs. Who knows
what
units they use?
Let us know what's going on.
And emails. Yeah. We still have the one that we gotta. We missed this show. Maybe next episode.
Get some of those reviews on here, but we'll talk about them. He had a couple of them had some interesting questions about what is this good or this bad. If it works for you, man, it's good.
Well, unless it's RX or something, then.
But it's still working. Damn it, John. That was a bad closer.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go swear at him
That's
now.
all right.
Once this goes offline, I'm gonna tell him.
Yeah, he's got the bleep button ready.
Yeah, I can.
Oh no! All right. Well, before we, devolve anymore from where we already have gone, I think that'll do it this week. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you.